The final One Piece chapter of the year brings evil Shanks to Elbaf. One Piece was on the cover of the magazine this week, along with several others as little dolls. I don't think there's ever been a greater example of Chopper's modern mascotification than the fact that he looks exactly the same. Also, it really hurts my heart not to see any of the old guard left. Deku's absence just feels wrong. The color spread this time around features these Straw Hats equipped with water guns atop a super mecha Frankie. This seems to be a salute to Frankie's voice actor, Kazuki Yao, who recently announced his retirement. He will definitely be missed. No cover page this time around, so Yamato's pilgrimage will last that much longer. It's been a bit of a snooze thus far, so I hope it can either get more interesting or we can go back to our usual silly fan requests soon. We return to the Straw Hats meeting Saul, with Luffy striking an old school pose. He expresses appreciation towards Saul taking care of Robin in the past in a Yakuza-esque way. This is quite the formal introduction from Luffy, so his respect is certainly genuine. But the Straw Hats could only wonder who the heck taught him to do that. Luffy claimed that nobody did. Robin told Saul his name. The big man laughed, since there's no way he wouldn't know about a world-famous emperor of the sea. But Saul was beaming with pride, knowing that Robin finally found the friends he said she would. Robin warmly confirmed his words. She went on to say that they're true friends that are willing to accept and protect someone like her. The many Straw Hats turned away bawling yet again, knowing that they would gladly die for her. And once again, Luffy and the two Aura farmers didn't shed a tear. Saul was really happy to meet her friends. He was seriously impressed by their venture to Elbaf. He also apologized for giving them a scare earlier. He and his assistant were rehearsing the bit for a good while, which we saw at the tail end of chapter 1131. Since he used to be a Marine, Saul knows just how impressive it is for Luffy to be a Yonko. He humbly thanked them for protecting Robin, and asked that they continue doing so, which Luffy certainly would. Just then, Lilith hovered up to an apprehensive Saul, claiming to know him. Saul took a good look at her face, but it wasn't ringing any bells. And the fact that she was flying wasn't helping much. The genius claimed to be Vegapunk, which only complicated things further. From there, Jinbei unloaded a mechanized Vega brand case. Gerd took hold of the heavy load. He was asked to bring it from Egghead, but he still doesn't know what's inside of it. Cheerfully, Lilith claimed that it's another Vegapunk. The idea of that totally freaked Luffy out, and he wasn't the only one. But unlike the various satellites, this is a perfect clone of Stella. Apparently, he used it to visit Elbaf 20 years ago, so he may even be more young and spry. In the past, he wasn't able to leave his lab for several months without alerting the world government. Since Vegapunk's brain is Punk Records and that's still intact, he's effectively immortal as far as new bodies go. So all's well that ends well, I guess. Although poor Kizaru is none the wiser and probably going through all the stages of grief as we speak. And is it just me, or is this whole cloning thing getting a bit out of hand? This series already refuses to kill anyone who wasn't literally made to die. So all this cloning feels like a bit much. We might as well clone Ace 2 while we're at it. But before we go any further, Opera One R2 is the smart and reliable web browser that you need. Totally transform the look of your experience with themes like Aurora or Midsommar. You can change the colors, add sound effects, and even animated backgrounds. And with tab traces, it's even easier to track your most recently used tabs thanks to a subtle underscore. There's also the ability to split your screen. You can drag a tab down to split your screen into two, keeping everything you need in one window. You can connect to the music service of your choice, detach the player, and even use it outside of the browser without an extra app. And you can't forget about Opera's AI, Aria. It can summarize web pages, reverse image search, answer image-based questions, and create new images from scratch. Take your browsing experience to the next level with Opera One R2, using the link in the description. Now back to the video. Without any more delay, Lilith prepared to get going. She already added a cultivation fluid, but she'll need to create some necessary equipment for the sake of a safe extraction. And to that end, she'll build a new lab right here on Elbaf. No building permit, no permission, just hunkering down and taking residence. And with that, Lilith for the Straw Hats seems to be dead. Bonnie asked her if that'll make it possible for her to help Kuma. And apparently that's the plan. That seems like a pretty casual way of saying Kuma will be restored to his old self somehow. Saul was a bit thrown off. But if Lilith really is Vegapunk, then he's happy to see her after 20 years. However, he asks the question we ourselves have yet to receive a proper answer to. Why is he a woman? Seriously, why are the satellites all so different physically and mentally? Why are some of them pretty girls while others are silly robots? Apparently, Lilith has a perfectly logical explanation for all of that. And taking a page out of Blackbeard's moveset, that was handled off screen. If this is made to be a joke, it's a pretty funny one. This old man has a totally reasonable explanation for turning into young women, but we'll never know what it is. Soon after, a few giant children popped up and asked if they can play now. Saul apologized to them and thanked them for waiting. According to his assistant, these kids use this area as a playground, but they had to hold them back for the sake of Saul's performance, which goes to show just how far they were willing to go with this. She properly introduced herself as Anj, an assistant teacher. Anj also humbly bragged about this place being Elbaf's greatest school and library. Hopefully that means there are others, otherwise that's a pretty empty boast. And Oda is definitely defying the same-face female allegations with this design. Anj offered to give them a tour. Luffy and Usopp didn't spare a single second when they were given a chance to mess around and see how Elbaf raises its young warriors. They were presented with the Walrus Folk School, which Saul established 20 years ago at the behest of Elbaf's late King Harold. Usopp was convinced that it's a training school for young warriors. Saul told Gerd and Anj to show the Straw Hats around the school while he takes Robin to the library. They happily agreed. Chopper opted to join them at the library. He expects the books to be huge. Brook chimed in that schools always make him feel nostalgic. And for an old man like Brook, it must have truly been ages since then. And I have a feeling that there's more to that statement. After all, how many of the Straw Hats can claim to have received a formal education? It's kinda crazy that we're over 1,000 chapters deep into the series, with years worth of extra SBS content, and we still don't know much of anything about Brook before he became a pirate. We don't even know what island he comes from. Sanji decided to stick with Nami. Frankie and Jinbei were fascinated by the giant tree. The little giants decided to chase after the shorties and pretend to take them prisoner. Luffy was having a blast, while Zoro wondered if he should cut them down, seemingly taking this as a warrior's provocation. But seeing as they're kids, Usopp shouted at him and said that he should be the mature one here. These antics were swiftly shut down by a trio of giant little girls who told them not to harm the adorable humans. The boys apologized and were doubly told not to call them shorties. Luffy was thrown off by just how lame they were. Zoro had to wonder if these brats are really the future warriors of Elbaf. Another giant boy warned him not to say words like brat anymore. Usopp was taken aback by the sensitivity of these little PC giants, especially since they weren't bothered at all about being called shorties. After all, these guys are supposed to be wild fighters willing to pillage and scorch the very seas themselves. One of the kids totally denounced his claim since fighting would be way too dangerous. Zoro was confused too. He was under the impression that these bastards are the next generation of Elbaf's warriors. They didn't like that word either. Now this was just getting ridiculous. Then another voice chimed in that such words are old-fashioned. According to Zoro, this was the voice of an adult. Usopp was confused by what they meant. The children warned them that they should probably move, because right now, they're standing on Miss Ripley. With the exception of Zoro, they accidentally climbed onto a giant lady. And this man Luffy had the nerve to bounce on her chest like he's in Gear 5. Which is kinda funny because Ripley is a biology teacher. She had no complaints about them being on her since they're so light. And although it may be a bit of a culture shock, she let them know that all the legends about the fearsome giant pirates are from 100 years ago. Everything those guys represent is from a bygone era. And this man Luffy is still drowning like he's in the sea. Ripley took Luffy and Usopp into her hand. She heard about them from Saul and welcomed the Straw Hats to Elbaf. Anj rushed over quickly and apologized for their loudmouthed brats. After all, Luffy is an emperor and so he should be respected. They pointed out her dated word usage, and she told them to do as she says, not as she does. Ripley raised them high and repeated the words of their late King Harold: "Seek trade with other nations, not wage war." A sentiment that put him at odds with the various Greybeards. Usopp was curious about this King Harold guy. Hans described King Harold as being a visionary who sought to revolutionize Elbaf, but tragically, he was killed by his very own son, the crazy Prince Loki. Elbaf still refuses to accept his claim to the throne, which is why they don't have a ruler at the moment. So the Elbaf of today is far weaker than it was in the past. Their culture is the total opposite of what it once was. There's more to be speculated about King Harold, but that'll come later in the video. But that was enough for the history lesson. Now they take a closer look at the school. But before then, Ripley pointed out that Luffy looks different from his white-haired wanted poster. She wondered why that was and expressed her desire to see him like that. Luffy happily replied that that's him at his freest. Not that she really understood what he meant by that. She went on to say that he looked like a legendary warrior from old Elbaf stories. A sight that made her heart skip a beat, especially since she's from the last generation of Elbaf warriors. So more Sun God lore on the way. Meanwhile, Saul learned that Robin was already aware that O'Hara's books had been moved here. The fact came up while they were trying to escape Egghead. Saul admitted that he couldn't stop worrying about the books after seeing the scholars sacrifice their lives for them. He was overcome by emotions when he saw just how many of them managed to survive. Each represents a small bit of hope. Before they entered, Saul gave Robin a warning about the book she was holding. As she walked in, the archaeology book grew even larger than her. Saul presented the library to them in all its glory. Any book that enters this place becomes gigantified. So now we know how the giants managed to read what the scholars of O'Hara left behind. All the books they managed to save are here. There isn't an explanation for how the books get bigger just yet. But there is a massive owl in this aptly named Owl Library, so it may have something to do with that. Animals can have devil fruit abilities after all. The chair next to it puts the creature's size into perspective. Robin was speechless. She recalled Professor Clover's declaration that O'Hara possesses the world's greatest library, along with his question as to whether or not she likes books. Saul never thought he'd have the honor of actually showing it to her. Tears welled up in Robin's eyes as a smile crept across her face. At the same time, down in the realm of the dead, Loki was speaking to someone with just as much free time as him. The speaker asked if they were imposing, but Loki didn't mind the disturbance at all. He has plenty of time to kill anyways. He asked the person if the moment of true fear they mentioned in the past is still what motivates them. Someone was speaking to him through a cold-resistant Den Den Mushi. The person agreed. Even now, the mere thought of it was enough to make them tremble. Loki felt the same way and expressed his frustration. They've been friends for a long time, but for one reason or another, they've never actually met in person. So they're like pen pals. At this point, I swear there's a mystery person damn near every chapter. Loki claimed that if he were in his friend's position, he would have turned the place into a ruin and slaughtered everyone. The person on the line told him that they don't want that. Although he recognizes this person's noble soul, they are way too naive to him. Loki refers to them as Mosa. According to him, the problematic figures need to be stomped out without mercy. That only a fool gives their enemy an opportunity to retaliate. Mosa thanked him for his advice. Although the prince uses harsh words, Mosa recognizes the streak of kindness below the surface. Loki was appalled by the sentiment and told Mosa never to say such a thing again. He refuses to be seen as kind, kinda like how Luffy refuses to be seen as a hero. Mosa just asked him not to shout. Clearly upset, Loki told Mosa to just wait until he's free from his shackles. Between this interaction and the one he had with Luffy, Prince Loki seems to be a pretty decent guy. Here he is thinking about how he'd help a friend he's never even seen before. I doubt he callously killed his own father like all of Elbaf seems to believe. With that being said, he is clearly very proud of his giant heritage and favors how things once were. He's King Harold's son, yet all he wants to do is wage war. This Loki has yet to be like the notorious trickster god he's based on. Perhaps he didn't outright kill his father, but has too much pride to say otherwise. He could very well view his own actions as no different. His father may have even praised him for his kindness in the past, making that quite the sore spot. Not only is he based on the Norse god Loki, but also the wolf Fenrir, as we've discussed before. Seeing as Elbaf has been made out to be a major destination for Usopp, Prince Loki might also be based on the boy who cried wolf. Nobody believes him anyways, so why relent? Revolutionizing the country is one thing, but having no new warriors at all is downright idiotic. Even the most peaceful of nations needs to have some sort of defense. Over in the village, all of the giants were drinking while waiting for the feast, although some were drinking a little too much. As such, a massive flash of black lightning went unnoticed as it descended upon the castle. Two hooded figures emerged in the midst of a decrepit throne room. Beneath them was a blazing pentagram we've previously seen from the Five Elders. One of these figures looks like Shanks, while the other appears to be a woman whose features are obscured by bandages. It seems like Figarland Garling hasn't wasted a breath, and is already putting things into motion. Based on this repetitive angle and hiding of his limbs, this seems to be the guy who caused Shanks' rat allegations. Yet another clone perhaps, but hopefully not. This could be Shanks' twin brother. As for the woman, it's hard to say on account of similar face syndrome. But since we're continuing with the whole Bonnie and Kuma thing, maybe this is Ginny. Nobody dies in this series after all, so maybe she miraculously survived her sapphire scales after being buried. It's a long shot, but to be fair, they were the result of unknown experimentation. Previously, it seemed as though this pentagram required someone with the capability to already be on the scene. But appearing in a throne room is hardly a conspicuous entry for two characters intent on hiding beneath robes. So I'd imagine this relay point was pre-established. Elbaf, and by extension its nobility, have been around for centuries. So this could have been set up ages ago. This may even be related to the death of Prince Harold. Loki is familiar with Shanks and spoke to him recently, so maybe he is also aware of the guy's evil brother. Which is kind of funny since everyone thinks that Loki is the evil brother. The Giants of Elbaf adore Shanks, so tarnishing his good name wouldn't be right. Loki did call the guy a coward, so there's definitely some amount of history between them. Even with Mother Caramel, the world government has been tampering with Elbaf for quite some time. They simultaneously revere and fear the might of the giants. So opening them up to trade and weakening them could be the long game. Whatever the case, it seems like God's Knights will be the antagonist for this arc as opposed to Prince Loki. Like the two longest arcs in the series, Dressrosa and Wano, it seems like we have yet another tale of falsely disgraced nobility reclaiming their nation. Luffy is familiar with Shanks' haki and general vibe, so aside from a lack of facial scars and missing arm, he should be able to tell them apart. A fight between them would be really cool. And since Kuma's coming back anyways, why not just throw Ginny into the mix and give them another shot at becoming a proper family? This arc keeps getting more and more interesting. Hopefully when One Piece returns next year, we won't have as many interruptions. Leave us your thoughts on everything in the comments. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.